Adam, this one isn't probably not something that's huge newsworthy, but I thought it brings up an interesting conversation, or you brought it up and it brings up an interesting conversation. So Dead by Daylight content being pulled. So this is coming straight from the Dead by Daylight team. So they wrote, in September of 2019, Dead by Daylight welcomed one of the most popular original horror properties of the last decade into the fog with Stranger Things chapter. Now, after 2 years filled with more brutal kills and last-second escapes than we can count, courtesy of the Demogorgon, Nancy Wheeler, and Steve Harrington, November 17th, 2021 will mark the last occasion for fans to purchase Stranger Things content in Dead by Daylight. Leading up to this date, we'll be celebrating the heroes and horrors of Hawkins with a blowout sale of all Stranger Things characters and cosmetics. If you've already purchased any of our Stranger Things content, fret not. It's yours to keep as long as you continue to play Dead by Daylight. If you've had your eye on any of the characters or outfits, you still want to add them to your collection, now's the time to scoop them up at an amazing discount. So, Adam, first of all, do you think that this has anything to do with Netflix getting into gaming? Do you think Netflix is pulling this back in for their IP in for their own
No,
games that we
I
talked
think
about?
it's just they signed a license for 2 years and that was the end of it.
Okay.
I don't think there's anything else too crazy, but I think it really just was they signed it for a couple of years. Because I mean, I don't think they even knew at the time just how long this game was going to keep going. Like it's still going strong. So
Mm-hmm.
they probably just signed it for a couple of years. I'm sure if it was going to be like a permanent license or a really long license, it was going to cost way too much money that the developers weren't willing to pay. So it was probably just a matter of this is probably about the time frame that we think it would be long enough that the game's probably going to, most people are going to buy it. And then at the same time, like it's not going to cost us too much in the end. So I think
Mm-hmm.
I really think it was just the license ran out and that's it. I don't think it was anything else too complicated.
Yeah, but like if it was so well and popular, would you imagine that they would have paid to keep it? Or
Um,
do you think Netflix is just not interested?
Well, I guess you're gonna know now if it suddenly has a lot of sales now that it's gonna be at a discount because they're putting it all half off. So,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I guess you'll know for
Yeah,
sure then, and maybe who knows, maybe you work something out again with them later down the road. But
yeah. But I'm deviating. This is not what we originally had in mind for the topic. So what we were going to talk about is like, how do you feel about DLC being pulled like this? Like, not necessarily with this instance, but like DLC or add-ons or content getting pulled from the store.
it goes one of two ways, right? Like in this case, it really is a licensing issue. Like we're not talking about like some just completely original character or map or anything else being taken down. We're talking a license thing. So in this specific case, it's like, I still don't like it, but I get it. If we were talking completely original stuff and they just took it off the store because, like, in the same way that Nintendo only had its Mario 3D collection for a limited time, that's the kind of thing where I'm like, that's not cool because what happens to people that don't have the money to buy it at that time or don't even know the game exists at that point? Like, there's always a possibility that at the end of November, people are going to just learn about Dead by Daylight as a game and they're going to be really sad because they really are big Stranger Things fans and they just never got a chance to have it. So it goes both ways, I think, and like, depending on the situation, I don't think there's an issue, but I think in general, I still don't like the practice to begin with because I think it really robs gamers the chance to have something cool, regardless of what you feel about it.
Yeah, for sure. And this is like, I'm going to put it on my old man hat and kind of complain about new and scary things, but this is one of the reasons why I am hesitant or not a big fan of um like DLC, or not DLC, but like digital only games, or going for a digital only game collection. I like having that sort of physical, game, so that no matter what, like, yes, it's not going to be what it is after updates and stuff, but like it's still available. Like if I want to pull a game from PS3, I have it no matter what, just because I have the disc. Sure, it may not be the exact same game that it ended up being, or it may not work as well because of patches or whatever, but I at least have something or some sort of content versus things like this. Or there's a new numbers of other games, like I know Disney has a bunch of games that got pulled. Nintendo pulled their Mario game, but like once again, the Mario one is different as well, because like there are physical copies floating around the world, so that if you do need to get it, it won't be cheap and it won't be easy necessarily, but like there are physical games still available. So I don't know. It's, for me, this is just like one of those notches of like why I'm skeptical or reluctant to go for a digital only sort of gaming world.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's even if you want to go back to the Silent Hill conversation, the whole fact that like the PT demo just
Mm-hmm.
vanished from stores. So like
Yep.
it got to a point where like people were selling off their consoles because it had the copy on it, and it would
Mm-hmm.
sell for much more than market value just because people want to be able to have that demo forever.
Yeah.
So it really does bring up that conversation of like, is it right to be able to just to pull stuff off store shelves, especially in a digital format? Like obviously now that we stand in here in the PS5 generation, for us that you know all this stuff's really backwards compatible. Like you know if they were ever one day to be like, okay, any PS4 game we're going to take it off the store on PS5, like that should never happen. Maybe during PS6, like let's assume PS6 exists and it's backwards compatible to only PS5. Whatever,
Mm-hmm.
if the PS4 store has to go down, it is what it is. But like I would never expect it to suddenly just tear down everything and just never make it available again. Like I'm still of the mind that like as soon as there is no way to ever to get any sort of copy, digital or physical, of something, you should be allowed to pirate it. Like flat out, like there should be ways to emulate otherwise, because if there's no way to get it, and especially if there's no way to get it without paying thousands of dollars, like if you
Yeah.
really want to play like an old, say, Atari game, but there's literally like 200 copies on the planet, and if you want one, it's going to cost you $1,800. You shouldn't have to pay for that. Like
Mm-hmm.
there comes a point, right? Like it's not we're not talking about right now, you know, getting a copy of GTA 3 on PS2. We're talking about like things that literally don't exist on the market anywhere. Like there's no way of getting it, and not even for a good price. So
Mm-hmm.
it's a very nuanced conversation, and this it's depending on the situation for each of these, but for the most part I just don't like the idea of stuff ever being taken down regardless.
Yeah, but if you think about it, like there's some situations like there is a foreseeable future where the PS5 digital only version may not, it might become a brick. And if you think about it, like it sounds crazy now, and I hope I'm wrong, but like if you think about it, like the PlayStation, we had that situation with the PS3 and the PlayStation Vita store going offline, and fortunately those have been, survived. And I wonder if anyone has actually bought anything now that that store is still back up and alive. But if you think of it, like the PSP store is still going down, and there was that PSP Go that was like a digital only console. And once the store goes, those things are going to become bricks unless you have games already on it.
Yeah,
They're not going to be
at
worth
the
anything.
very least, if you know it's shutting down, you have the opportunity to at least just install as much as you can. But there's unless you have like a ton of external drives, you're
Mhm.
not going to be able to get everything. So
Exactly. So for me, it's just raises the question too of video game preservation, and is this something that does video game preservation matter, Adam?
I think it does, because I consider video games to be the same as preserving history. You know,
Hmm.
even I know a lot of people don't care about any just random like Atari Jaguar game, but they should all be preserved somehow. There should be some way of being able to like go back and just see what it was. You know,
See,
sorry, you can
I'm
go
gonna
ahead.
challenge. I'm gonna challenge that notion right there. That like we need to preserve everything, and I don't know if that's necessarily the case.
I mean, if we're talking really, really old stuff, it's not hard. Most of these things are so small that you could literally cram entire libraries on a thumb drive and it wouldn't take much.
I know what you're saying, and I don't disagree with you on in that it would be hard. But the problem is that like as you like think of how many games have been made, and like how do you preserve every single iteration? Like when we get to something like Destiny, do we keep Destiny and we keep the version with Peter Dinklage voice and then the Nolan North voice? Like if you think about it, like with like artwork or films and stuff, like we don't catalog and preserve everything like that. There's way too much. Like not every single movie that has ever released is preserved and kept and stored because it just takes up way too much space. One of the things with preservation and like museum curation is that you have to, you know, constantly like you kind of have to reassess your collection, and like you don't necessarily need to have every single piece of content, but just if you have something that reflects the time and the space, you get the ones that are culturally significant, the ones that are moving the genre, or ones that are enigmatic of something. That's when you sort of preserve those, but you don't need to have every single shovelware kind of preserved in game.
Well, let me ask you a question then. Are you referring to the preservation of games as an industry thing or as something just in general, as like fans being able to do it? Because I agree that like companies should not be forced to keep copies of their software for eternity. You know, the ones that matter the most, the companies will hang on to. Like all the Mario games are going to be forever held by Nintendo because they know they can always keep bringing it back and making what they want. But I mean, I think as fans, like especially when it comes to things like emulation, as we've seen over the years, like we should be trying as much as we can to preserve as much as we can, and it has been done to this day. It's still being done as much as possible.
No, I
don't think the industry itself has a moral obligation to do so, but I think we as fans should be trying to do as much as we can, just for the sake of it.
I'm talking like from like a archival perspective, not necessarily from the industry or the developers themselves, but for like the gaming population. And I think we need to have a conversation of, is every game worth preserving?
I think just because, like I said, because it doesn't take much space, if we're going really far back in the old days of gaming, I don't think it's that much of an ask either. I mean, you can literally go to like any emulation site or even go to like a torrent site and you can find the entire like NES library and it's not even a gigabyte, I think. So
no, I know what you mean. I'm just saying like,
it's definitely possible.
But as we get to larger and larger games, and like think of something like Fortnite, do we preserve every season and every sort of iteration?
When you start getting into modern games where there's a lot more thing, like again when we're talking with Dead by Daylight and DLC, that's where it gets tricky.
Yeah. I mean, like, just
in terms
because
of preserving that stuff, that's where you really get into murky waters because not everybody's copy of that game is going to be the same.
Exactly, and that's kind of what I'm getting at. Like, yeah, it would be easy for us to preserve older games, but like, does it matter? Like, do we need everything that like the Commodore 64 made and all like the other like we're thinking of stuff, you know, before the NES? Like there was a lot of shovelware. There's a reason why the industry collapsed on itself.
Well, I mean, if the question is, do we need it? No. Would I like it? Yes.
Fair enough.
And I mean, when it comes to things like, let's say, Destiny or Dead by Daylight or Fortnite, I don't care about preserving the DLC like for years and years and years. Preserve the base game if you can. That's really the only important thing. Just preserve the base.
Yeah.
Although then you get tricky if it's online only games too, because if they don't have servers, what do you do?
I mean, granted that we also have the benefit that there are so many, like now that Twitch and live streaming and gameplays are so prevalent, the stuff is being archived, maybe not in a way that like it's playable for you or
there's always
you,
like you have
for you children
of
2080 listening to this podcast, you know, 60 years from now, no, there is no way for you to play Dead by Daylight, but you can go and watch, you know, your grandparents play it when they were 20 on Twitch.
Well, assuming those sites still last.
Twitcharchive.com.
It'll be because that's the thing. Go
to your local library and go look at the archives of the Twitch archives that they've kept preserved.
Yeah, there's going to be some really weird shit.
Check out the hot tub controversies of 2021. That was a golden age.
Yeah, there's gonna by the time that we are dead and gone, there's gonna be some weird parts in the history textbooks when it comes to social like actual social experiments and how we evolved in some of the more mainstream concepts and stuff.
Things got weird after 2019.
But I mean, and again, like if, like I said, online games gets weird. I think if, let's say we take a single player game, like you take, I don't know, let's just say Final Fantasy 15. I don't think you preserve like costumes or like certain things like that. I think there's way too much to it that it's a little bit difficult, but like, as long as the base game, which can be played offline, as long as that's a thing, I think preservation should be necessary if possible. Like I said, doesn't have to be an industry mandated thing, but like, I mean, we see people all the time doing what they can to archive it. You see people literally taking. There's a guy that not too long ago made a mod for Simpsons Hit and Run where there's no loading screens anymore. It's just all one big map. Like people still to this day will like improve games that are like decades old, so you never know, right?
Yeah,
there's different ways to preserve because like you got things like people now have GoldenEye mods for PC where you can play with mouse and keyboard at 60 frames. Like you never know what the future holds if people care enough about something.